But you're referring to some of the images on the front page, actually, Tommy Robinson.
From the man known as Tommy Robinson.
And probably the most influential instigator of it all is Tommy Robinson.
Welcome back. I'm in a forest just outside of Nuremberg in Germany. And actually, Nuremberg is like the perfect place to film this video. If you don't know your history, Nuremberg is where, at the end of the Second World War, the Nazis were tried and many of them sentenced to death. Now, I say it's the perfect place to film a video like this because that's kind of what half of the UK seems to think Tommy Robinson is. And I just thought we'd go through, because this might seem very last week, but I think this issue is going to come back, especially when Tommy Robinson re-enters the UK. So I just thought we'd go through, look at the arguments as to whether he is responsible for inciting the riots, like all the media, like Keir Starmer has been saying, and the Met Police Commissioner implying. We'll have a little like guiltometer up here, and every time Tommy becomes more and more guilty, we'll just add that number from 0 and we'll just keep going. And you know, if it gets to 100, I'll go and nick him myself. Probably wouldn't go very well for me, but but we'll do that, and we'll start it at 0 because everyone's innocent until proven guilty. So yeah, let's just have a little bit of fun with it. Now, the first kind of argument that I want to address is this. It's not a very good argument, but I think some people probably believe it. This idea that all of the people who are rioting are Tommy Robinson supporters, and therefore, logically, it's somehow his fault. Now, that's absurd. I think it's absurd for two reasons. I don't think, you know, the people who are smashing up buildings and stealing Greggs and stealing Crocs and whatever else, I don't think they're there for any political reason. And I don't think all of them are Tommy Robinson supporters. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that they are. They all love Tommy Robinson. Okay, fine. The argument still doesn't work. I could also say, imagine a world in which they all love Winston Churchill. So they're all Winston Churchill fans. But it's absurd to say, well, Winston Churchill incited the riots just because they all like Winston Churchill. Maybe they all do, but Winston Churchill hasn't incited the riots. So that's just absurd. I could even, a bit of controversial, but I could even go one step further and I could say of the 9/11 attacks and the 7/7 bombings, the Manchester Arena bomber, Charlie Hebdo, I could go on endlessly, that one thing that these people all have in common is that they all love the Prophet Muhammad. So therefore, the Prophet Muhammad inspired them and incited them to do these actions. Well, immediately you're thinking, well, no, that's absurd. Okay, good. Then the argument's settled. Tommy Robinson, just because they're all Tommy Robinson fans, has not incited them to riot. But what's that I hear you say? You've got another argument up your sleeve. And this argument is that the situation is different because these people buy into Tommy Robinson's rhetoric, his anti-immigration rhetoric, and that is why it's different, and that is why he's responsible for the riots. Okay, maybe that's a stronger argument, but not really, because simply having a platform and saying, you know, we need lower immigration, this is what immigration is doing to our country, isn't sufficient to say you've incited riots unless you've actually incited riots. And look, Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, Rishi Sunak said, I'm going to stop the boats. We're going to get people out of these hotels. I'm going to stop the boats.
Now, one of the most powerful forces reshaping our world is unprecedented mass migration. The wind of change that carried my own parents across the globe in the 20th century was a mere gust compared to the hurricane that is coming.
Is Rishi Sunak, did he incite the riots? Yeah, from his sunbed in California or his Michelin star restaurant? No, it's absurd. There's probably some, you won't like this, but there's probably some far left-wing people out there who would say, yeah, get Rishi Sunak in court, get Suella Braverman in court, but it's just absurd. Just having a political opinion and expressing it and voicing it, unless that political opinion is like an incitement to violence or something like that, You know, that's really just not sufficient to say that someone has incited, you know, riots. I think it's very obvious to me anyway that in order to say that someone has incited violence or incited riots, they have to actually have, you know, well, they have to, I mean, it's tautological, but they have to have actually incited the riots, you know, in some way, not just have a political opinion which is shared by the rioters. Yeah, it just isn't sufficient. So for me, you know, the fact that, ooh, is that a snake? We've got a snake. You want to take a look at the snake? We'll get a little bit distracted. Crazy. Very cool. You playing dead? He's either playing dead or he's dead. One or the other, I don't know. It doesn't look particularly dangerous though, not to me anyway. I lost my train of thought. I'm going to have to go away and have a think. Okay, well, I've regathered my train of thought after being distracted by that enormous snake. Look, it was a very long-winded way of getting from A to B, but my point is, people, I think, are not critically reasoning and they're being a little bit lazy with their thought. Perhaps they've already got an impression of Tommy Robinson, which is pretty unfortunate, and they're just using that to kind of in their heads, well, this is what I can blame this on. This is why I can say there was this unrest when there was these huge protests turned riots. If I can blame it all on Tommy Robinson, yeah, then I can take all the problems and put them away in a little box and forget about them for 2 months, 3 months, a year, 5 years, however long until they become too big to ignore, I guess. So look, really what I'm saying is we have to look at what he has actually said, what he's actually done, particularly regarding the riots, whether he's incited them or not. Now that's quite easy to do actually, because he only really has one platform that he hasn't been deplatformed from, and that's Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. So really you can just very easily look at his tweets leading up to it and around the riots, and you can see quite clearly, you know, at no point has he called for violence.
I know there's a protest tonight in London. Lads, you've got to remain calm. Just an appeal for calm, man. Anyone going to London tonight? There's protest down the street outside Parliament for Prime Minister's questions, I believe. Try and bring the numbers, bring the noise, but don't bring any violence, man. Our country is in the gutter. We ain't going to win it back by throwing a few rocks at coppers. I'm frustrated, I'm angry, but to go out and burn a police building in a block of buildings with multiple occupancies is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Yeah? Insane, really. And yeah, the level of violence, it won't work, okay? It'll just give them the excuse not to listen to the wider public's general concerns and fears on all of these issues.
We're on the verge of something massive where we've won the hearts and minds of the public. Don't undo that, yeah? We had 100,000 people on the streets of London in a peaceful resistance. That 100,000 will become 250,000. 250 will become 500,000. A peaceful revolution is brewing in Great Britain. A peaceful revolution.
Now, I've been following Tommy Robinson for a couple of months now, and you know, in all of the protests that he's led, he has always appealed for calm, always, genuinely, and they've all gone peacefully, okay? Once the trouble broke out, he was very quick to tell people not to be violent. You know, the messaging was very clear. You know, you're not going to get your country back or whatever just by throwing a few rocks at coppers, okay? It's just not going to happen, and he's right. And in fact, all that's going to happen is some idiots are going to go to prison for a very long time. And it's pretty unfortunate, but those people have just damaged the cause, I guess, of the message of people who want lower immigration in the UK. Now, there is one more piece of evidence which is potentially the most damning against Tommy in this sort of, I guess, analysis, if you like. And it's a video that he posted onto X, and I'll just play the video here for you now, and I'll give my thoughts on it afterwards.
Stop the fucking boats. Get them out of them hotels. Get them gone. Put them on boats and send them back. Okay? They shouldn't be here. They're endangering the safety of our families. Men will rise up. We're always going to rise up. They have to rise up to defend their families. You've brought this war on our shores.
Okay, so in the video, he says we need to get the, I can't remember the exact terminology he used, and I don't have the video in front of me because I'm in the middle of a forest, but he says, you know, broadly, we need to get the migrants out of the hotels and send them back to their own countries, whether that's Iraq, Syria, you know, wherever it is, right? Now, to me, that sounds like the most damning thing that he said, particularly given that some of the hotels themselves were targets for the riots, right? But look, for me, it's very clear that that's a message for politicians. He's not implying that ordinary citizens should go to the hotels, you know, take these people out and then what? Charter a private jet and send them to Syria or Iraq. That's ludicrous. He's clearly speaking to politicians when he says this. So again, for me, that first part of the video is very obviously not him inciting riots or anything like that. The second part of the video is very interesting. He says, and I'm not quoting verbatim, but you've just seen the video. He says something along the lines of, men were always going to rise up. People have to rise up to protect their children, something like that. Now, that's a little bit more interesting because it all depends on the definition of rising up. And what does that mean? What is he saying when he talks about men have to rise up? What is he saying there exactly? And yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit trickier. I think he could make a very clear and easy argument for saying, when I talk about rising up, I'm talking about peaceful protest. And in fact, given that historically he's always spoken about peaceful protest and a peaceful revolution, I think he could make that case very, very well. But it's definitely by far the most controversial or sort of damning video that I could find around the riots. You know, that was actually after the riots had started, but yeah, that's the most damning piece of evidence I can find. Now, why have I made this video? I've made this video because I think this is going to become a big issue again. At the moment we see, you know, I go on the BBC News app, right? And I'm watching and there's like live streams. 12,500 people were watching earlier, seeing these rioters be sent to prison or be given their sentences. Now, I'll be honest, for a lot of those people, I don't think they have any political motivations. I think they're just idiots. Like one guy has gone to jail. He was just drinking at a pub, saw an opportunity to give the police a hard time. Whatever, send him to jail. Apply the law equally though, and send people of all groups who commit those kinds of actions to jail. So if you punch a female policewoman in the face in an airport and break her nose, then you go to jail too, for longer in fact, I would say. Anyway, I digress, that's another point. But look, I've got no real sympathy for most of these rioters, okay, for the people who've caused real trouble. I do have some sympathy for people like Steve Malin, who I spoke about in my last video, who 26 months in prison for gesticulating at and shouting at the police. I mean, for me, that's one of the ones that sticks in my mind. I just think that that's absolutely ludicrous. Over 2 years of your life in prison because you swore at the police and gave them the finger. I just still can't wrap my head around that. You know, it's not good behaviour. I get that. 26 months. We've got people committing like genuinely very serious offences, repeat offenders, burglars. Not that we ever catch any burglars, but you know, thieves, all kinds of very serious offences who get less time or suspended sentences, and I just find that ludicrous. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. My point that I was trying to make is I think this is going to become a really big topic again because Tommy is eventually going to come back to the UK, He's going to be arrested anyway over a contempt of court case for a documentary he published where he was told not to publish it, and he's published it anyway, so he's going to be arrested for that. But I think when he comes back, they will try very, very hard to pin the blame of the riots and inciting the riots on him. And I think it's important for us to, you know, be able to look at sort of the evidence objectively and come to our own conclusions, because I don't think he incited the riots at all, and I don't think that that fact, that truth, that matter is going to save him, frankly. I think they'll come down on him like a ton of bricks, because that seems to be the de facto method of the state at the moment, which is, I don't know, anyone who's giving the establishment a bit of trouble, let's give them some lengthy prison sentences. And actually, look, I'm not just talking about all the far rightists here. I saw another case which, look, people will probably unsubscribe when they hear me say this, but Just Stop Oil. Look, I don't agree with Just Stop Oil, but a Just Stop Oil protester, a young student at Cambridge University, bit of an idiot, studying the M25, 5 years in prison. I mean, look, say what you will, 5 years in prison for peaceful protest. The average sentence, I think, for rape that's handed down is like 6 years. We can't equate those crimes. Now look, blocking the M25, causing people to miss their flights, super annoying. Has to be deterred. I do understand it. 5 years though, I don't know. It just feels like people are no longer being sentenced for the actual crime that they've committed, but based on, you know, your perspective towards the state, what you stand for, what your values are, rather than your actual crime, you know? That's just me, anyway. Yeah, make of that what you will. To put that into perspective, let's say someone was just drunk and being an idiot, and they stood in the middle of the M25, right? They're not getting 5 years in prison. So she's getting 5 years in prison for doing the same thing because it's politically motivated against the state. Anyway, that's all I'll say on it. Right, I've rambled enough in this video, but yeah, Tommy, not guilty. Not sure that'll help him. See you later.
There is not going to be a bloody civil war in my country.
Oh, for God's sake, here we go again with this fucking shit.
Oh, just bloody shut up, will you? Look, Elon, if you don't delete those ex-posts, I'll have no choice but to label you a far-right thug.
That's not too bad. I was expecting worse.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes me sound badass. Elon the far-right thug. Yeah, I kind of like it, to be honest.
What do you mean? Being called a far-right thug is possibly the worst thing you can be called in this day and age.
Yeah, whatever you say.
Right, fine. I'll ban X in the UK then.
You know, VPNs exist, right?
No, what in the far-right wizardry is that?
Never mind.